To order, please. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing. Following the Pledge of Allegiance will be a silent moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will have the reading of the notice, please.
The adjourned organizational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, composed of 38 members, will convene at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 4th Street, Wausau, on Tuesday, October 22nd at 6 p.m., and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you. And I would like to request everyone, please silence your cell phones, put them on vibrate as to not to be an interruption in the meeting, and I thank you for your indulgence. And we'll move on to roll call and ask everyone, please sign in. And thank you. I'd like to welcome all of the visitors that we have with us this evening, and also welcome all of those in the viewing audience on public television. And thank you for your interest in Marathon County government. And we'll proceed to item B, educational presentation and/or reports. Standing committee chairpersons or designees. Any reports by standing committee chairs or designees? Supervisor Robinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Earlier this afternoon, earlier today, we found out that the notice for the public hearing on the budget was not properly noticed within the 15-day period. And we are going to continue with the November 1st hearing of the county board. But there's again, a 15-day notice. The Herald was supposed to put it in 17th or 18th, and they didn't get it into a couple of days later. So what we will do is we will have the public hearing of the county board on Friday, November 1st at 3 o'clock, and then we will ask the county board to authorize the Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee to have a second hearing on November 11th, prior to the adoption of the budget consistent with the state statutes. You're welcome to attend that, but I wanted to give you a heads up that was occurring.
Thank you. Any other reports by standing committee chairs or designees? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to consent agenda. Items C8 through items C13D, with one exception, and that is item 13B has been requested separate action, so item 13B will be removed and voted on separately. And what is your pleasure on the rest of the consent agenda? Items C8 through items C13D, with the exception of item 13B. Supervisor Drabek with the motion, Supervisor Covelli with the second. Supervisor Jensen, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to request we remove item 12A4 from the consent agenda, which is amending section 9.21 of the General Code of Ordinances to require a separate discussion and vote. I have concerns. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I have concerns that this amendment could abridge the freedom of speech, which is a protected First Amendment right in the U.S. Constitution. The wording of the ordinance is vague.
We'll get to that discussion as a separate. The request has been honored. It'll be removed separately, and we'll be discussing it as certain after the consent agenda has been approved. So
Thank you.
items C8 through items C13D with items 12A4 removed and items 13B removed. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote on items C8 through items C13D with items 12A4 removed and items 13B removed. Supervisor Hoppe, if you could vote, please. Thank you, and we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. Now we will take up items 12A4. What is your pleasure? And I'll need the clerk to enter that item separately on the end. All right, motion by Supervisor Robinson, a second by Supervisor Marash. Now Supervisor Jensen.
Thank you, Chair. So I have concerns that this amendment could abridge freedom of speech, which is a protected First Amendment right in the U.S. Constitution. The wording of the ordinance is vague and subject to interpretation by those involved. What actions are considered boisterous? Who can determine what is unreasonably loud? I would ask that we take this up as a separate item, which we are, so we could fully discuss this ordinance amendment as well as solicit input from our county clerk. If there is a history demonstrating the need for this ordinance amendment, as well as from Corporation Counsel to provide an opinion to the board.
Okay, Supervisor Sandalski is next.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank Supervisor Jensen for separating this. I agree with him wholeheartedly. This ordinance was brought up through public safety, and Sheriff Bill was asked the question too, was there any calls or claims of abuse, profanity, unreasonable conduct, or anything else stated in this ordinance? He stated there were no reports or no calls to the Sheriff's Department whatsoever. The more I think about this at a deeper level, I can't support this ordinance. I look at the future consequences of this ordinance. I can't say for certain within Marathon County, but on a national scale, in the 2020 election, there was a wide range of election fraud throughout the United States. There is an enormous amount of evidence on this matter. That being said, this ordinance could actually hinder someone's ability to question whether election fraud was present or not without getting slapped with a big fine. So in conclusion, I would not be supporting this ordinance. We need to hold election officials accountable. We also need to work to bring back election integrity. This ordinance would not be helpful for that. Thank you.
I ask Corp Counsel to address the questions raised by Supervisor Jensen as far as legality and issues. Please, Corp Counsel.
So your noted concern what it infringes on free speech and that also it's vaguely unclear, therefore a person would not be able to know when they would be in violation of statute. That was your concern, correct?
Correct.
So I don't necessarily agree. So this statute is modeled specifically after, I believe, Wisconsin Statute 94701, which is a criminal statute. And so far, that statute has been on the books. It has not been successfully challenged. No court in Wisconsin has found that it is either vague or that it otherwise infringes on the right to free speech. And so until a court would rule otherwise, this language is currently actually in the state statutes, so there would nothing prohibited from, being in our ordinances. Now, if on the state level if the court were to examine it and find it vague or otherwise unconstitutional, then it wouldn't be allowed in our ordinance as well. But so far, to my knowledge, there has been no successful challenge to the state statute, and this language is modeled after the state statute.
Supervisor Poole, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I saw this in one of the committee meetings. There was a question about how this relates to state statutes. My understanding from what I heard is the state statutes can have even a more severe penalty or maybe go to a felony for this. And this, having a local statute may muddy the water somewhat about who has jurisdiction or so forth. I just had a question along those lines. I'd like clarification, or if you or Administrator Leonard could comment on that, if you recall the conversation along those lines.
Whoever wants to, Administrator Leonard, and
I'll start, but I will respectfully defer. It's a good thing District Attorney Whetstone is here. As Corporation Counsel referenced, the language in the what is slated as 9.21 parent 1, the no person shall in a public or private place engage in violent, abusive, indecent, profane, boisterous, unreasonably loud, or otherwise disorderly conduct under circumstances in which such conduct tends to cause or provoke a disturbance. That is, I believe, word for word from 947.01. Excuse me, prosecution of the state criminal statutes for violation of section 947.01 is vested entirely within the district attorney's office. Likewise, if an ordinance prosecution were to happen under this statute, that would be a forfeiture prosecution as opposed to a criminal prosecution. That likewise would be vested in DA Whetstone's office. So effectively, what this allows is for an additional avenue of prosecution outside of the existing state criminal statute under 947.01, which, as you kind of alluded to, has a more substantial penalty. In that one, it is a criminal violation, a misdemeanor. Also, the penalty is a fine as opposed to a forfeiture. This ordinance prosecution is just that. It's an ordinance. It's a non-criminal prosecution. So it is this is just an analogy, but another tool in the toolbox to allow law enforcement and the district attorney's office to, if they see fit, to utilize as prosecutors and or law enforcement officers. But with that, I'd certainly defer to DA Whetstone if she has anything to add relative to the concerns about the applicability of the ordinance or any other concerns.
So I didn't vet the ordinance as it relates to the legality as far as it mirroring the state law because I wasn't asked to do that. But as far as the ordinance and use of the ordinance, it will still be law enforcement discretion. It is another tool in the toolbox where there might be behavior that law enforcement wants to at some level hold accountable, but does not want to have an arrest or a criminal referral, but would like to acknowledge that the behavior crossed the line and was disorderly. So it does allow for law enforcement to have that option specifically as it relates to this. I'm not saying I'm advocating for this at all. I'm just stating the facts as we see it from our office, and I'm not saying I'm not making statements against it either. But as far as the passage of this, one thing that I did say is that it is a visible statement, an acknowledgement by the county because it is something passed by the county that this is something that the county will not tolerate by passage of this ordinance. I think it is a statement to that effect. But as far as enforcement, it does not limit in any way the option of our office or law enforcement making an arrest if it is a criminal matter that they wish to pursue that way or we wish to charge it that way.
Deputy Corporal Corp Counsel, please.
And I'll let the DA comment on my comment more, but I think sometimes this allows for more tools in the toolbox to appropriate the level to the situation. And so I think like we don't want to we could potentially find ourselves where, like Class B misdemeanor is the offense, I believe, under 94701. And so sometimes, that's not always going to be the best punishment that's available, but it's the only one available right now. So this would give law enforcement another avenue, in this case, a lesser avenue of enforcement that they would be able and have at their disposal if they think that perhaps going with a Class B misdemeanor would be too harsh. And I would then let the DA also comment on.
The clerk would add comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this ordinance was brought to public safety at my request. I asked them to take a look at this. And like District Attorney Whetstone said, I think one of the key things that this does is send a very clear message to our municipal clerks, to our hundreds of election inspectors across the county, that we value you. We are going to take this issue seriously, and we are not going to tolerate any kind of disruptive action at the polling places or directed to them personally. This is in no way an attempt to squelch questions. If people have respectful questions to ask of clerks or election inspectors, this is no way intended to do that by any means. We welcome questions. We encourage people to come watch our processes, see what's going on at the polling locations in other places. This is not intended to do that. This is just another level of protection, like everyone has said, another tool in the toolbox. It's meant to be proactive rather than reactive, to give law enforcement another means to support our election workers and our clerks. Thank you.
Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the question I have is, does the disorderly conduct have to be directed during an election or related to an election? What if the municipal clerk or the county clerk is in a store and someone verbally speaks out against them and says something? It almost seems like this could be used against that person. So that would be one question. And then the other question is I understand the focus on the election and elected officials, but I'm not inclined to vote yes because we're all elected officials, and where's the protection similarly for us or other any elected official in that case? It seems to have a very narrow focus, and those are my 2 points.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion?
If I may, Mr. Chair, would there be some clarification on about the disorderly conduct, where it took place and what it was in reference to? Or is that...
So it would be, from what I can understand here, and like again, it is modeled after the state statute, so there are people in this room who are more well-versed in those statutes than I am. However, it states that it's in a public or private place. So anywhere essentially where you could get a disorderly conduct charge, you could be prosecuted under this ordinance within the county. So, it's if law enforcement had grounds to charge disorderly conduct.
May I?
Go ahead. DA Whetstone, please.
Thank you. I just want to point out that we already have a county ordinance of disorderly conduct under 9.21. So this is just adding and we shouldn't say just, but this is adding a subsection to that specifically relating to election workers. But I just want people to understand that if there was behavior that rose to the level of under 9.21 of in a public or private place engaging in violent, abusive, indecent, profane, boisterous, unreasonably loud, or otherwise disorderly conduct under circumstances in which such conduct tends to cause or provoke a disturbance, if that occurred at this point in time in a polling place or any other place, law enforcement could take action under that ordinance. So this subsection just acknowledges the unique circumstances, I believe, of election workers and takes that into consideration, but there could be action already under a disorderly conduct ordinance, just to make that clear. Thank you.
Supervisor Opal, please.
I think my question is, thank you, Chairman Gibbs, but I think my question has been answered. I was going to ask, how does this differ from the normal catch-all disorderly conduct charge?
And I think it's already been answered, so thank you. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. And we'll move on to now item 13B, 13B, from the Extension and Economic Development, Extension Education Economic Development Committee, a resolution calling for the state elected officials to work collaboratively to address the child care shortage in Wisconsin. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Robinson. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Conway. Discussion. Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was the one who asked that this be pulled separately. And I have a concern about the government's involvement in daycare and child care. It seems to me this is just a selective item that's subjective to this time, that we want somehow to ask the state to solve some issue which they're not going to be able to solve. If we think about, and I'll use the example of 4K and 3K and see how this relates. So, and bear with me here, in 2003, there were 183 school districts, 44% that had 4K in some form. Only 24 or 13% of those had it full-time. In 2023, so 20 years later, we have 364 districts, a doubling that have 4K in some form. 118 have full-time, or 32%, so almost a tripling of those. So why do I bring that up? One reason that daycares are suffering, and this is in this whole discussion, is that 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, older kids who typically are in daycare are no longer in daycare. They're actually in school. And property taxes, local property taxes, are paying for those children. So the profit margin for daycares is decreased because you have to have more resources to take care of younger children. There is a push, I'm a school board member, I've been a school board member for 14 years. There is a push within the School Board Association and within the state to make 4K paid for by the state full-time, and it currently is half-time. The other half is made up by local property tax. In addition to that, there's a push to make 3K half-time paid for by the state. So the state is already in this mindset where they've already hurt daycare by putting so much energy and effort into 4K to now make that greater, that the state's going to be taking care of it. What do you think is going to happen to daycares? What do you think is going to happen to childcare? It's going to be much more difficult for those entities to actually make a profit and take care of children. So the government, in essence, helped create the problem. Now we're asking the government, the state government, to solve the problem. It's simply a problem they cannot solve. And so I'm not going to be part of a resolution that asks the state to step in to solve something that they really have no ability to solve. Thank you.
Other discussion? Supervisor Poole, please.
As I'm employed by the state legislature, I will be abstaining on this one.
Abstention granted. Any other discussion? Supervisor Marshall, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was contacted by a grandmother of someone who said, is it not up to us to determine what is safe or unsafe for our, for my children, my grandchildren, because an unregulated daycare, and I know our social services shuts them down, even places where parents feel their kids are safe. So again, government, I agree with Supervisor Dickinson. We create the problem, and now we're asking the state government to solve the problem. Again, the parents are saying, why can't I determine what's safe and not safe for my kids?
Supervisor Marash, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the previous comments. And the reason that the EED committee brought this forward was because we originally had the idea to send a letter asking for support. Instead, we decided that a resolution would have more weight. I do believe that families should decide what is best for them and whether the mom should stay home or work, but here's the reality. We have an economic development crisis in this county. We have many people that want to go to work, but they can't. And if the state is going to have to do something to support this initiative, because that's just the situation as it is. And it's always up to the family whether the mom decides to stay home or not. So I do support this resolution, and I hope the rest of you will too. We need to have more bipartisan cooperation, and that's what this is intended to convey. Thank you.
Supervisor Marshall.
Another point is that the childcare and the need for workers is something that private enterprise can solve. I drove around town and happened to just take pictures of the number of sports facilities that are sponsored by, I will not name every business on here, but I will tell you that I believe there's a soccer field that's sponsored by a bank. There's a Greenheck Field House. There's the Wausau Tile, PGA Plumbing, JD Tube Benders. If they want to solve the problem by offering childcare for workers, then that is something that is within their control as well. Again, there's money for many other ventures throughout our community. If they wanted to, there'd be money for childcare.
Other discussion? Other discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. And we'll move on to appointments. Item D. Item D14, Joint City of Wausau and Marathon County Homelessness Task Force.
So this appointment is on approval of the board, appointing the following individuals as the Marathon County Board Representative to the Homelessness Task Force for the initial term of 100 days and any potential renewal periods. Supervisor Ron Cavelli as a co-chair, Supervisor Bill Conway, the Business Community Leader Representative Kent Olson of Olson Tire and Auto, the local nonprofit organization serving the homeless representative, Diane Senholtz of North Central Community Action Program, faith-based organization involved in homeless initiative, Craig Vincent of Bridge Street Mission, the mental health and substance abuse treatment provider, Vicki Tilka of North Central Healthcare, government agencies responsible for behavioral health services, Law Enforcement and Housing, Matt Barnes, City of Wausau Police Department, and the Homeless Population Advocate, Beth Ann Richland, or her designee from Wisconsin Judicare.
Okay, what is your pleasure? Oops. Motion by Supervisor Marash and second by Supervisor Arstead. Discussion, Supervisor Cavelli, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Seeing that I'm on the list for appointment, I'd like to abstain from this vote.
An abstention wouldn't be necessary just because you're appointed to the committee. So you're not required to abstain. Supervisor Gisselman, please.
Yes, thank you. I thank you for initiating this this task force. I hope that with compassion as we go forth for the next 100 days, that this task force will really study the issue. The City of Wausau, of course, has been looking at this for months and almost into years, and I personally, for one, do not want to see another winter when we see people die in underneath porches. People die in fields of a mountain. I think that with this task force, we have the ability to do something really positive for the City of Wausau and for Marathon County. And I would hope that this becomes a task force of compassion, willing to do something and not criminalize the homeless people that we have within us. I think that we have to be diligent and with a kind eye look at the homeless population and with effort lay out a plan within the next 100 days that indeed does accomplish something, that it has positive goals. I look forward to this. I hope that it's just not a task force of talk, but that it is really something that will come before this county board in 100 days, and I look forward to that. So thank you for the initiation and the people wanting to serve on this committee. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion on the appointments? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed, and the motion is carried. Thank you. We will move on to the Environmental Resources Committee. Item E, 15, the Town of Ringgold Rezone Ordinance Amendment, Ordinance 0-36-24. What is your pleasure? Supervisor Kroll with the motion, Supervisor Mask with the second. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. Supervisor Unger, thank you. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. Thank you. And we'll move on to item F from the Executive Committee, F16, adopting the Marathon County Comprehensive Plan 2024 amendments. Again, this is just the amendments. Ordinance 42-24, item F16. Motion by Supervisor Marash and second by Supervisor Robinson. Any discussion? Any discussion? Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was, just looking at the agenda. This is O42-24, is that correct? And in the packet, O42-24 is medical examiner fee? So it looks like we're voting on 41-24?
Correct, that's a typo, and it should be, Scribner's error should be ordinance 41-24. Thank you for pointing that out. Should be 41-24. Again, this was the amendment to the comprehensive plan, as often described, was cleanup to allow an adoption of the farmland preservation into the 2016 original comprehensive plan to allow for the farmers to continue to collect the property tax on the farmland preservation credit. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to resolutions, Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee. Acceptance of the donation for the Regional Forensic Science Center, Resolution 46-24, item G17. Motion by Supervisor Robinson and seconded by Supervisor Drabek. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. Supervisor Conway, could you vote, please? And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. And that did require a 2/3 majority vote. Resolution approving the sale of 405 South 8th Avenue, Wausau, Wisconsin. Resolution 47-24, item G18. Motion by Supervisor Mask and second by Supervisor Foote. Supervisor Sandusky, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify, if the people weren't here on the educational meeting, the property is on 8th Avenue is being sold for 40% below the appraised value to the city of Wausau. It was appraised at $99,000 and they're selling for $60,000. I'm not going to support the resolution as it stands because I don't feel it's a good value for the taxpayers of Marathon County. I would also like to maybe ask Corp Counsel if this is a possibility, if we could make a motion to send this back to the administrator to possibly get a renegotiation on this property.
So I do not believe that anything was signed, so if it does not pass, yes, the administrator could renegotiate that price.
Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the property along Stewart Avenue that is on the north side of the road that was used for a parking lot. And it was declared the university was no longer interested in it. It's surplus property to the county, and we've owned it for quite some time. Back in December of last year, we adopted a resolution on dealing with trying to improve the access to housing. And one of those was to work with local units of government relative to our surplus property. That's what this is. There was an appraisal done that came in at, as Supervisor Sandusky said, just under $100,000. The Community Development Authority approached the committee with an offer that was $40,000 less because they argued that those were their development costs. The committee chose to accept that offer with some contingencies that the housing to meet that critical shortage in the county occur within 3 years, in that if they failed to do that, we reserve the right to purchase it back at our cost. Basically what we sold it to them for. Again, it's trying to address that critical need of housing within the community. It's surplus property associated with the university, not tax deeded property. And I encourage, if we're going to be serious about trying to get affordable housing, we need to look at where our surplus property aligns with the interests of local units of government to develop those housing opportunities.
Supervisor Sandalski, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had one other comment I want to make. This, I don't know if I feel like this could set precedent for future properties that we could sell within the county, that they could sell them for below the appraised value or the market value. I'd rather try to keep it up around the market value. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So earlier today, HR Finance was discussing tax delinquent properties and the process of that. And one of the topics was the requirement based upon a recent court ruling and statute, I believe, from 2022, I believe, that when we have tax delinquent properties, we have to sell those to a fair market value to some degree, and Corp Counsel's nodding his head yes. And here, what we're saying is, well, when it's a property, we own, we don't have to do that. Those seem inconsistent to me. I think the concept of selling first to the open market is a better way. I don't like a special deal for one entity, whether it be any municipality in that regard. I certainly don't think that we should be selling at a lower rate, negotiating a special deal with, redevelopment costs, which isn't really normal when you're selling property. And then finally, I'll just get into the same issue that I always get into because this is who I am, government involvement in an issue which is not a government issue, regardless of what the current socioeconomic conditions are. So I will not vote for this. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. Thank you. Moving on to Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee and the Executive Committee. Item H19, a resolution approving the broadband expansion loan agreement. Resolution 48-24. Motion by Supervisor Robinson, second by Supervisor Ritter. Any discussion? Supervisor Seibert.
Thank you, Chairman Gibbs. On this broadband, I read an article that our nation has spent $41 billion on broadband throughout the country. Not one person is hooked up yet. So is this becoming a money pit? I don't understand that when it was rocks were in the way and then this was in the way. And with these rocks, any company that would have been diligent would have knew what that geographic was. If there was rocks, they would have knew that. So, what's happening? A month from now, are they going to want more money? 3 months from now, are they going to want more money? A year from now, is anyone going to be hooked up for service? Thank you.
Supervisor Hoppe, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair Gibbs. I found out today that there's an organization called BEAD, and Buck Tussle can get the money from them. All of the entities that are pursuing broadband in the state of Wisconsin, none of them except Buck Tussle has gone back to the county and asked for funding. They go through BEAD. Buck Tussle decides to come through the county. So I'm thinking maybe Chair Robinson would add something to this, but there's no way I'm going to vote for this.
Supervisor Robinson, please.
I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. So the proposal before us tonight is to build off the 2021 conduit borrowing that the county authorized. We joined with Fond du Lac County and several other counties for $75 million worth of bonding. $25 million of that was allocated to Marathon County to build 16 towers and 190 miles worth of fiber to connect those. It's a backbone. Our law enforcement is dependent upon that. It helps improve our public safety because we're putting our equipment on those. As part of the conduit borrowing agreement, we get access to those towers, and we have 24 strands of fiber. The cost went up, as costs have for several other providers. Bug Tussle, unlike Frontier, decided to continue with the project. Frontier submitted a grant application to the Public Service Commission in March of 2022 to serve, we're not sure how many people in the county, but anywhere from 3,600 to 10,000. And after a couple of years, decided to walk away from that because their costs went up. Charter Communication had a Rural Digital Opportunity Fund where several hundred parcels in western Marathon County have been connected to the internet at gigabyte service. They walked away from 155 homes because the cost went up. Bug Tussle is not choosing to walk away. They want to complete the project, which is the request for the $5 million for that 2021 borrowing issue. $3 million of it is associated with the Leather Camp project, which is in Knowlton, Gunther, and Cronewater, to serve about 636 homes and make the connections. And we had committed to them, or the county board had adopted a resolution saying that we would provide a loan to them at $3 million. We were looking at ARPA funds. We found out that ARPA wasn't eligible. They came back and asked for conduit bonding, and we looked at it. In August, we took that back and negotiated an agreement with them. Under the agreement, we will provide $8 million, not the $12.5 million that they originally sought, for completing those two projects that will get broadband out to those people. Again, the advantage to the county is access to those towers for law enforcement. Deputy Sheriff Milhausen provided a memo to you explaining how important that is. When the Dancy Tower went down, we were able to connect to their tower at a savings of hundreds of thousands of dollars to the county that we would not have been able to save if it was not for this agreement. So there are benefits to the county. In terms of the BEAD, BEAD is Broadband Equity and Access Deployment Program. There's $42.5 billion available nationwide. And Supervisor Stoiber, you're right on. We are frustrated at how slow that process is. But there's also been the Federal Communications Rural Digital Opportunity Fund that has extended broadband in the county. There have been public service grants that have been awarded to Serenity, Wittenberg Telephone Company in the southeast part of the county to expand service. There's the public service grant that matched $3 million to Bug Tussle for the Leather Camp project. So there are a number of things that are occurring. There are a number of programs on the state and federal level between the Public Service Commission, the use of the American Rescue Plan Act dollars, the Reconnect program. There are a number of programs. The BEAD program, that $42.5 billion, $1.055 billion will be available to the state of Wisconsin, and we'll be doing a presentation next week to the western towns. We did a presentation to the eastern towns last week relative to the status. It's slow. The anticipation is that beginning November 1st through early January, they will be opening up for internet service providers to submit plans to serve and underserved residents. There are 8,443 broadband serviceable locations in Marathon County. There are 206,000 broadband serviceable locations in the state of Wisconsin. The BEAD money will be used to provide service to them. Round one will be fiber to the premise. They'll go out and bid. They'll give preliminary awards. If they don't serve everybody, they'll try to negotiate with providers. Round two would be fixed wireless and coaxial cable. If they can't serve them all, they'll go out and use other technologies, including satellite service such as Starlink. It's an effort to try to serve the entire state, but hundreds of thousands of residents in Wisconsin have received internet through various state and federal programs. The BEAD program, to the chagrin of many, has been slow, cumbersome, and we would like to see it happen quicker, but things won't be built into that program until probably 2026. But we're not in control of that. We are in control of things like our agreements with Bug Tussle, and this will expand opportunities for fixed wireless service to people that live within the range of the towers, as well as access to fiber to the premise for those that are located along the route. This agreement is again different than the one that was here 2 months ago because A, they're requesting less money from us. At that time, they were looking for a 30-year amortization schedule. The proposal before us calls for them to be loaned the money basically when they spend it. And there will be interest only for the first 5 years. After that, they will make interest and principal payments based upon a 30-year amortization schedule. The original proposal was for a 15-year period and a balloon payment at the end of that based upon concerns raised by the Extension Education and Economic Development. That was shortened to 12 years. And we're funding it out of reserves versus conduit borrowing. We are not impacting our credit rating or, we've checked with our financial advisors. And the interest rate is 5.4%, which was tied into what the local government investment rate was, and that rate has subsequently been going down, as many interest rates are. So it's a very good deal for us over the duration, but it gives us access to the towers and lets them complete the towers. It provides a valuable service to law enforcement. It allows us to connect, and it provides those 24 fibers to us to connect with our Stratford facility to backhaul information for law enforcement and to meet some of the other needs of the county. So I really encourage you to look at it. This is not the BEAD, and BEAD is on the horizon. We don't know the exact time frame for that build out, but if you're without internet, you're one of those 8,443, whatever time it takes. If it's 2026, that is an eternity. If you're dependent upon that for telework, telehealth, virtual education, even socialization, we need to move this forward.
The one thing, Supervisor Sorbert, you're 100% correct. The nation in the bipartisan infrastructure bill allocated $40-some billion for broadband throughout this country. Now, unfortunately, at this point, the process has been very slow, as Supervisor Robinson clearly points out. But at this point, none of that 42 or 41 billion has been spent yet. Because the process is still in FCC hands, and the process is being looked at. There's 200,000 in the state of Wisconsin that don't have broadband or are underserved or unserved. And that $1 billion is being looked at. But as Supervisor Robinson clearly points out, that's not what this is. This is going to effectively connect those towers to fiber and also finish the project over in the Dancy area. Supervisor Wilhelm, please.
Thank you, Chair. What are we receiving for an interest payment from where it's savings or wherever we have our money invested into in the funds?
Currently, we're receiving on some of the reserves of the dollars we're receiving as the Chairman of the Finance Committee clearly pointed out, we're receiving roughly 5.3%. It's tied to the state fund, and but I would caution people and understand that this is a 5.4 that we're getting here, and this is fixed for the projections are the interest rates are going to continue to fall. The projections are the Fed's going to have a reduction in interest rates probably over the next 4 times that they meet, and that's going to affect that rate that we're receiving by the other fund.
So this could generate more revenue without having to raise levy, or now are we able, and that just stays in the reserve fund, or is that?
It goes, the interest goes back into the general fund.
In the general fund or the reserve fund?
Well, it
accounting?
goes, the principal goes back into the reserve fund, the interest would go into the general fund.
Thank you.
Supervisor Seibert, please.
Thank you, Chairman Gibbs. I just have one more question on the towers. Are the towers built, or are more towers needed because of going from 4 to 5 band and things like that? You hear people talking that it's terrible when you're traveling in a car. You lose signal, you get cut out, you got to redial. Is that because the towers are too far apart, or what's the deal with that? Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson, you want to answer that?
I'll try. So as they move from 4G to 5G, you have a stronger signal for a shorter distance. And for cellular service, it means you need more towers. The proposal that Bug Tussle brought to us was for a fixed wireless service. One of the advantages of the towers is it can also, in addition to providing that Wi-Fi service or that internet service, it also is a cellular service. And 52% of the data transmitted goes over your phone. And that's growing, I think, over the last 3 years by 89%. So is there a need for more towers? Yes. There are a number of providers that are building towers, but typically it's the cell phone companies and or other parties that will rent them out. Bug Tussle has a relationship with AT&T, but I think they rent out to others, so it strengthens that from a communication perspective. But the original design was for a fixed wireless service. It was not necessarily done with the intent of providing cellular service throughout the county. I think over time you will see more and more towers go up, but again, this is more of the internet and other things. But there is, I think, I'm frustrated because areas that I used to have coverage in, you don't. Even in the city, there's times where I'm dropping calls regularly where I never used to. But as they move up to that next generation of cell service, they need more towers.
Any further discussion? All right, this does require a 2/3 majority. We'll move on. We'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. And we'll move on to item I, Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee and the Public Safety Committee. Item I-20, a resolution to amend the 2024 annual budget to accept and awarded funds under the 2024 Bureau of Justice Assistance Smart Prosecution Grant, Resolution 49-24. Motion by Supervisor Marash and seconded by Supervisor Mask, please. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move on to item I-21, the creation of one FTE, Deputy Sheriff in Marathon County Sheriff's Office to provide contractual services for the Village of Rib Mountain. Resolution 50-24. Motion by Supervisor Poole and seconded by Supervisor Mask. Any discussion? Supervisor Jensen, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question for Administrator Leonard. For the $5,000 that goes to the tax levy for this position, I'm curious what that entails, if that's equipment, what that makeup is here.
Administrator Leonard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the things that came out of HR Finance is the desire to, in the future, look to have a better understanding of how much overhead costs we have included in that position. So the short explanation to your question of what does the levy go for, or if we're truly covering our costs, I haven't conducted that evaluation at this point. The contract that started with Rib Mountain began when Rib Mountain was a town, and Rib Mountain was, we, the county, were spending a significant amount of time delivering law enforcement services in the town, which was mandated based on, that's a county-covered service area. With the transition of the town to a village, I think HR Finance appropriately asked for us to kind of take another look at that to make sure that we are truly capturing an appropriate amount of overhead within that contract. I will say in my conversations with the sheriff's office, they completely understand that and agree. There are a lot of parts of our agreement, that contract with Rib Mountain, that actually do accrue to the benefit of the county, particularly even since the town has become a village. For example, we have, if there's a call for service outside of the village boundaries, our agreement with the village allows for that deputy to respond and provide mutual aid for those sorts of events. Similarly, we have those individuals that are assigned to the village serve on some of our special teams. But the explanation that I can give you about are we truly covering every part of overhead, I know we're not. I mean, we're not allocating all aspects of supervision or facilities to that position. My direction from HR Finance is to do some more work on that end, which we will do moving forward. But this is, if you're asking for my thought on the contract, and certainly there are representatives from Rib Mountain that also serve on the board that can elaborate, I think it is a very mutually beneficial agreement, even as it stands. But we're happy to bring back more information in the future. But Rib Mountain covers the cost of the squad. They cover all the time for that individual deputy. And like I said, some of the time that the deputy is having, whether it's training time or other things, accrues to the benefit of the county.
Other discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to miscellaneous business, announcements and/or requests. Any announcements and/or requests? Okay, just one announcement. Again, as Supervisor Robinson noted, that the next meeting of this board will be the public hearing for the budget, scheduled for Friday, November 1st at 3 o'clock, and that is open for virtual attendance. Anything else? Any other announcements? All right, we're down to item number 23. Motion by Supervisor Cavalli and second by Supervisor Marash to adjourn. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Well.